Hey, so today I'm joined by Nadia Ramo of DoctorBones on Instagram, and I just appreciate her energy and what she brings to the Instagram world as far as like educating people about energy and herbalism. So thank you for coming, Nadia.
My pleasure. Yeah, happy to get on here and talk about all the witchy cool things.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Mia Magic is who shared you, and I started following you from there. And I don't know, I just appreciate just the energy you bring. Like you're fun and very educated, and I just figure people would benefit from learning from that, so thanks for agreeing to come on here.
Yeah, totally.
So which came first in your world, the herbalism or the acupuncture?
Acupuncture actually came first. The portal into the world of Chinese medicine in general was actually through tea ceremony. So kind of herbalism somewhat first because I got obsessed with tea and Chinese tea ceremony and just like buying all the different tea, like it was all the same plant. It's all Camellia sinensis, but like the different processing versus like the climate and the soil and all of that was sort of dictating how these teas would turn out. And I was a really wild, fiery teenager, and I got into it in my teens. And it was just this like one thing in my life that made me feel really calm, really good. And I learned about Taoism and Chinese culture. And so tea sort of portaled me into that world.
Who brought you to the tea? Like, how did you get introduced?
I was like, grew up Southern California, big surfer, and a couple of my surfing friends were like into it randomly. And right by where we would surf, this guy opened up a tea shop. And so, like, I had like a crush on a boy who liked tea. And I was just like, what's this tea thing? And then, I forgot about the boy. And then just like my crush became the tea.
That's awesome. I know
Yeah.
the Taoism, like I was introduced to that, I guess, by way of Wayne Dyer and like his books and stuff, but like it's such a natural way of being. So
Yeah, such a resonance. Like I grew up, my parents came from Syria, like, and my mom came from a really kind of conservative Syrian family, but Catholic, and my dad very conservative Islamic family, but they both came to America for like they wanted us to have religious freedom, but
mhm.
they put me in Catholic school, which didn't really make much sense. But I found like I questioned a lot around the Catholicism religion. And I remember like going into these debates in religion class and stuff.
Sure they
Then,
loved you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I got lots of detentions. But I felt this call to spirituality, but like I couldn't really, nothing landed in like the dogmatic kind of religious philosophies around these institutionalized forms of religion. But then when I found Taoism, which was like much more philosophical, and it's so subjective in how you experience sort of the idea of the way. And it's
Mhm.
like you as the person leaning into the way, and it's kind of like this idea of universal consciousness, and then the idea of the universe guiding you, and the laws of nature. And to me, I found, God and spirituality through nature, which is sort of how Taoism correlated spirituality is through nature. So when I first started learning about Taoism, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like that God through that lens makes sense to me.
That's really cool. And then somehow someone tipped you off about acupuncture and you're like, I'll try it. Or did you, I mean, I imagine you must have experienced it before you decided to choose it as a career.
No, I
Okay.
didn't. I
Well, I
I
had a Reiki session before I learned Reiki before I ever
received
received
it.
it. Yeah. So it's not that shocking.
Yeah,
It's
right. It's like
fine.
a calling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at a young age, I did want to be like a doctor, but then I learned very quickly I didn't want to work at a hospital. And
Mm.
then like I was actually studying the LSATs to go to law school, which makes no sense. But like while I was studying for law school, I was like drinking all these different teas and being like, oh, I'm obsessed with tea and I'm obsessed with Chinese tea. Like I knew I wanted to get more education postgraduate, and I just like thought it was law because my sister was a lawyer and I went to work for her over the summers, and like it was just like this default. But then quickly I just like I realized I was like, oh yeah, acupuncture, Chinese medicine. And so once I decided, I got into a Chinese medicine school, and then I went to an acupuncture clinic and I got acupuncture, and I had a full like outer body wild experience. Like I thought my whole body flipped upside
Oh,
down.
wow.
and I was like completely upside down in this chair. And then I was looking at this meridian poster, just like seeing like a key to unlock the universe. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I get to study. And it was just a full body yes.
That's amazing. I had a I started going to acupuncture like 2012, I think, and right after we decided we were going to move, and this was like 10 years ago, and it was a big move because our kids were 7 and 9 at the time, and it was a big disruption and whatever. So I went to, it was like it was a big undertaking, very stressful. So I went to acupuncture just like a normal appointment, and they put whatever needles in, and all of a sudden I felt like the room started to spin,
Yeah.
and the girl's like, oh, that's okay, just breathe, and it's like, what's going on in your life? I'm like, well, just had this like topsy-turvy decision of moving my whole family. So it
Yeah.
was like so cool to have that reflection in the energy,
Mm-hmm.
like in my energy. It was like,
Yeah.
that
No,
was like
your
really neat.
energy's spinning, right? So
Yeah,
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 I'm just like calibrating it.
right, yeah, it was a lot. So after you had that experience, then you decided you wanted to learn acupuncture
Yeah,
yourself?
like yeah, at that point I decided I was going to go to acupuncture school, and then the acupuncture treatment kind of confirmed it for
Right,
me.
right.
And then I went to Chinese medicine school. And so what happened to me actually is I was in school for a little while, and I went on a hike with a friend that at this point I was 4 years in. And I had studied at least like 400 different Chinese
what
herbs.
what is the year span of that?
About four
Okay,
years.
okay,
If you can go directly into it with an associate, and it'll take you maybe a little bit longer, but if you have a bachelor's, usually about four
okay.
years. And yeah, I was kind of at the end. At this point, I had studied 400 Chinese herbs, about, I don't know, like 200 formulas. And I was hiking with my friend, and he was like, so you're a Chinese medicine doctor, like you're an herbalist, and like, what are all these plants? And I was like, huh, I know like what a Chinese herb in a
Look,
bag or
yeah,
in a jar looks like. But if I go hiking and I want to call myself an herbalist, I don't know what a single plant out here is.
right,
And I
right,
live in California, and if I'm going to be practicing herbal medicine, like probably want to know the local medicine around here. So then that kind of just like created a whole like sort of side endeavor of herbalism. And I started learning from, I started going on local plant walks and starting to learn how to ID local plants. And then hearing names, like, because we'd have to learn the English name, the Latin name, and the Chinese name. But then, something like peony, which is all over, but Chinese has a peony, but then California has a peony. And then I was like, oh, it's the same properties. And I started comparing the two medicines together. And then like I got really lucky and got to spend some time with a Shumash, which the Shumash is the indigenous, tribe around the Santa Monica Mountains. I got to spend some time with them and learn herbalism through their
cool.
perspective. So like a kind of more native approach, which
Hmm.
so many medicinal like qualities that you could never find online about these plants. So yeah, I just like started to get attuned more to the local medicine, and then started kind of making the parallels of like especially certain Chinese herbs, you can only get them in China. It might have lead. You might not know the quality. Sometimes Chinese will send stuff to America and they'll say it's something, but it's not. So
Hmm.
I just like started to kind of hunt down where can I get some of these herbs like locally, and how
Right,
can I get quality, and where are they sourced from, and starting to ask these deeper questions.
right. That's
Yeah.
like, and like one of the things you posted, I don't know, probably over a month ago, but I remember you saying something about whatever this blend was that you were regularly consuming during 2020 and you never got COVID. Like
Yeah.
what was that
Yeah.
consisting of?
That's a traditional patented Chinese herbal formula called Jade Wind's green powder. It's only 3 herbs, but I added licorice to it just to kind of harmonize the flavoring a little bit. Plus licorice harmonizes other herbs. But yeah, it has astragalus, this other Chinese herb called feng feng, which is in the asparagus family. It's the root, and then it also has atractalotus, which it's a native Chinese herb, but it's a root that there is a certain, I forget the genus name, but you can find like an American Western version of that herb, of the atractalotus. But ultimately, it builds our defensive chi, it's called our wei chi. So it helps really with like build the immune system. the design of the formula is all about boosting the digestion, and through boosting the digestion, which is what is ultimately responsible for our immune system, it's going to help like build a stronger immune system so that we are less susceptible to getting sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love that for my son. He got sick a lot as a kid and he had a lot of antibiotics and he's chronically congested and I'm like, I know there's an answer, but he doesn't really want to entertain my, you know, my
Yeah.
solutions. So like I would love to get him. I had him go to my friend who's an acupuncturist and she worked for them for a little bit, but I'm sure there's some kind of blend of something that can help him, recreate the gut biome so it's healthy and balanced so he's not someone that's chronically congested. Like, like I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something that you would do in your world.
Totally. Some things you could do. I mean, for that formula too, you could even put it in a little spray bottle and spray. I have you can go through my link in my bio on Instagram and I have the recipe for that tincture where you can
Hmm.
find all the herbs. It's all outlined. So you can make the tincture and then you can make a spray out of it.
So are you like, you're passionate about showing what you know. Are you more into, like, I know you have some products for sale. Would you rather empower people with just telling them what to do? Or are you happy to like create the product and be like, here, let me just make it easier for you?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. I haven't had a lot of time to like go full throttle invest into like a product line to really
Right.
ultimately support me with
Mhm.
financially.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it takes a lot
so
of effort to get that far.
it takes a lot of effort to get that
Yeah.
far. And also like making all that stuff at home is beautiful. And I love being able to handcraft everything. But then once it's going at a mass scale, everything starts to shift and change. And so
Mm.
I've looked at different manufacturing to be like, can you make it like this? And they're like, well, we wouldn't be able to make it like this. So then we would have to do it like this. And
And you're like,
I'm
that
like, well,
compromises the integrity of it. And you're like, forget it. Yeah.
exactly. So I really struggled with like, yeah, a lot of people are like, why don't you just sell these things yourself? And that's a good question. I mean, maybe down the line I'll get there, but
Right.
right now I'm kind of just finding the balance of selling things that I love to make and also empowering people because like I really believe that you mean how we got this far as a human was our relationship to medicine and the plants. And it's like
Hmm.
ultimately like we've evolved as a species through our relationship to the plants. And
Yeah.
so I want to help us remember that and remember that like this is part of being a human and how empowered we can be to not feel like we have to go call our doctor about every little thing
Right.
or like look up Lord Google for the answer and to just be like, oh yeah, like let me not freak out that there's like 10,000 things that might be wrong with me because I'm having like pain in my rib cage. Cause like
Mm.
it's terrifying if you just look that up on Google. But
Right.
like pain under the rib cage, like, okay, bupleurum powder is really good for that. Bupleurum root is really good for that. So then you're like, I'm having so much pain under my rib cage. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I might have hepatitis, all these things. And then you just have 1 cup of bupleurum and then you're like, good to go. And then the stress just antagonizes the
Right.
symptoms. Just like, yeah, it's sometimes it is just a matter of like, there's stagnation builds up in the body. It could be emotional. It could be
Mhm.
physical, something you ate agitated your liver, or, you have repressed anger that agitated the liver. And then this chi congealed underneath
Mhm.
the rib cage. And, the root of the issue is to really allow yourself to express that anger safely and consciously, or don't eat that food that's going to aggravate you,
Yeah.
but like, once that stagnation is there and the symptoms are falling into place, like to have the herb to like alleviate that symptom will actually give you more permission to like find clarity of kind of like the herb sort of brings clarity because it's harmonizing your chi. So now you're like, oh, like I'm actually realizing that this tension is rooted in my anger towards like
Mhm.
not having this confrontational conversation. And you'll see how the herbs will actually inspire you to have that conversation. They're like such little subtle allies,
That's
you know?
amazing. And like it was only in the last, I mean, I've been doing energy work and like body work for basically my whole life, but like more energy specific in the last 15 years. And oh shit, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, the herbalism. Like, so like I didn't know to connect with the plant, the spirit of the plant until like a year and a half ago. I'm like, somehow
Right.
that never kind of crept in all of this. So do you like connect with the energy of the plant, like the spirit of the plant as part, like that's part of being an herbalist? But like, I don't know how they trained you for that or like how that clicked for you, where you're like, dude, I'm actually connecting with like the the essence of the plant. It's not just like, how can this plant serve me? But it's like, hey, brother, hey, sister, like, let's work together. Like, it's really,
Yeah.
I just find that so amazing. Like, I'm regularly amazed that everything's alive and that everything is consciousness, and like, how
Yeah.
cool, you
How
know? So,
cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, there is in the realm of South American, plant medicine, like the vegetalistas, the curanderas, the realm of also like ayahuasca and all of that.
mhm,
Like there's the tradition of the dieta, which is the idea to really simplify your diet, to be really quiet and internal, and to drink a big pitcher or like, a big tea of a particular plant every single day and start to tune into the subtleties of that plant. So I personally have designed my own dietas. I've also joined dietas that were facilitated by other like curanderos. And then I've
that's like another name for witch, for like South, like,
yeah,
in
that's
case
like a
people don't
South,
know.
curandero, like curar means to cure. So
Mhm,
somebody that is curing ailments.
mhm,
That vegetalisto is like a person of vegetation, that knows the vegetation. And so, yeah, like basically through this practice of consuming a plant every single day, simplifying the diet to like bland foods. You don't want to like overstimulate the system with other things, especially like coffee and tobacco and like other things that like those are strong plant presences. So you
mhm,
sort of deprive yourself of other strong plants, so then you
mhm.
can really tune into the subtleties of this particular plant. And it's I think it's a trained thing. I feel like the first few years I was diving into herbs, I had no idea, but at this point it's almost been a decade down the line, and I would say just in the last year I've been really being able to start to like discover a dialogue that's in the
Right.
space. Yeah,
I know,
it's
it's so neat that it was like, it was there all along. You just didn't have like the language to like put it in place and to understand it on that level.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's just, I'm regularly impressed by it. Me and my friend were just talking about like how she disconnected with the tree in her yard, and she's like,
Yeah,
why didn't I ever connect with it before? And she felt the
totally.
breeze after she connected with it. And it's just like, it's so cool.
Yeah.
I
And
think go ahead. I don't want to
oh
interrupt.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, a lot of times it is just like a matter of sitting in silence and not even trying to get
Right.
to a point,
Hmm.
but to just observe.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like opening the senses to the situation and like, yeah. And then that through like the sensory, it's a much more embodied language than it's not mental at
Mhm.
all.
Right.
We feel it much more than we can like hear
Right.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, I'm still like kind of new to it, where I'm just like kind of just, I still feel too so new to it. Like, I can't even speak with much experience, except for and I've shared this before on my podcast, but like when I first connected with the Amanita mushroom, like I felt like it's like dancey, playful energy. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's like happy and joyful, like I didn't know what I was going to expect by connecting to its energy, but I got a whole personality from it. And I was like, this is crazy. So I think
Yeah.
what prompted me to reach out to you is because I was just getting exploring Blue Lotus and like learning about that, and then you had mentioned it like right after I was just thinking about it and getting into it for myself. So I was like, oh, let me just reach out to her. So what do you know about Blue Lotus? Because I don't know a lot. I've since
Uh,
made tinctures. I haven't even put labels on them yet, but I'm like excited to share this with people because I so many, I'm sure you do as well with clients. Like I'm assuming you see people one-on-one as you work on people. You're not
yeah.
just like, one aspect of your work, but so many people struggle with sleep, and like whatever, like anxiety.
Yeah.
So I figured that was a good answer. So what do you know about that?
Yeah, blue lotus. I mean, blue lotus is one of my favorite plants. If people don't like if people are really struggling tuning into a spirit of the plant without taking a psychedelic first,
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
like, try blue lotus because it's not subtle at all. It's very apparent. But it's in terms of like causing an effect. I mean, most people get like a little bit of a giddiness, but from like, so we could talk about it in the very like Western sort of biochemical components of it, is that it has these alkaloids that do cross the blood-brain barrier, which ultimately can kind of classify as an entheogen, so a bit of a psychoactive, but it helps regulate dopamine levels. But like if you have, but in an adaptogenic way, so like it's not going to spike your dopamine, but it's also not going to make your dopamine crash. So it kind of just regulates it. And it's just like it like it binds to the dopamine receptor sites, and it just like ensures that the dopamine's at like a good baseline level, which
Mhm.
ultimately we want. Baseline level healthy amounts of dopamine will ultimately make us feel at peace. Well, dopamine is a feel good feeling, but what happens when we take something like, MDMA, is the dopamine goes through the roof and then we crash. So with something like Blue Lotus, is that we're getting like a regulated, even keeled baseline default healthy dopamine level. So we're not like crashing, we're not trying to reach for something else, but we're also not like spiking too high. So it's good for depression. It's good for people that have low dopamine. It's also really good for Parkinson's, which Parkinson's is ultimately when the dopamine receptors are being overstimulated. So the Blue Lotus can help with just like kind of stopping that overstimulation. And then it also has it increases like blood flow and like in like this very neuromuscular way. So it's like it's really causing the like mind body part circulation sort of loop connection to really be synergistic with each other. So for people that are really disembodied or disassociated from their body parts, it
Mhm.
helps with that. So one thing that it's been highly studied for is erectile dysfunction. And so it really helps just like bring the blood flow into a part of your body that like it might be disconnected. And then it also does have like some sedative components to it in the sense that it's gonna ultimately, in terms of biofeedback, regulate the heart rhythm, regulate the respiratory rhythm, so that you go into parasympathetic, and
Mhm.
that's why it'll help something like sleep,
Okay.
anxiety. And then the Egyptians, which were like kind of the more ancient tradition, that like there are, I mean, it's endless the amount of artifacts around utilizing Blue Lotus in rituals, in the
Mhm.
temples, priestesses presenting them to the pharaohs. There's a whole papyrus that's 200 feet tall that has this whole scene that's like an orgy, basically, of these women with Blue Lotus in there on their heads. And then the men are like penetrating the women with the Blue Lotus, holding the Blue Lotus up to their nose. And so there's this relationship to the scent of it and being incredibly arousing.
Right.
And then also high doses. So the Egyptian tradition was extracting it in a wine and
Right.
then doing a very high extraction, and that it will take you on a journey. It is psychedelic in that when you do a really high concentration. I mean, your tincture is not going to do that, but like
No.
an incredibly high dose in a wine extraction, for sure you can go on a little bit of a journey. From what I've heard, I haven't experienced it yet, but it's definitely like a giddiness. It's very frolicky. It's very light. It's very like playful.
Right. I know
Yeah.
I haven't done it in a high dose, but I did feel like a third eye kind of tingle.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so third eye. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
like third eye sacral because it has that like sexual component to it. And then also
Mhm.
very third eye, which is nice because it's like very uplifting, visionary, but also really like grounding and embodied and sensual.
I know. And like I mentioned the Amanita. So that's the other thing I was learning more about. And they say the one guy I was speaking with about that, he's like how he sees it as like the root chakra, like it brings you into your body more than
Yeah.
other ones. So I don't know if you have any experience with that too.
I haven't experienced Amanita, but
Mhm.
I mean, mushrooms in general are they're ground beings.
Yeah.
So, the mycelium network, they drop you dead.
It's so neat. Like, yeah, one time when I was on in like, I'd like, microdose. I don't not I wasn't like really on a lot of it, but like just, as I'm drifting off to sleep, I'm seeing that like the mycelium network and I'm seeing like human consciousness like parallel to each other. I'm like, holy shit, like this is all connected. Like it's just like
Oh yeah. No, the
it's
mycelium
amazing.
network is a manifestation of like the energetic grid that connects us all. Also, it is the embodiment of like the internet too. It's like
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
global communication system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've
And
mimicked mycelium through the internet. Mycelium mimicked the interconnected web that weaves us all. Like it's just, yeah.
yeah, all our consciousness. And one thing I heard recently, which I thought was really cool, and I'm not sure where you're at with this stuff. You probably are familiar-ish with like elementals and everything, but like there was a girl who said the wee folk went underground when like humans became asshole humans, and they went to underground to protect themselves, and now they are in the voice of like the mushrooms. I was like, holy shit, that's so cool. So
That's
I like that idea. But yeah, what do you have to say about like anything else like relating to that stuff, or like the working with the elements, or whatever, anything else that excites you to like share? I'm happy to hear.
Yeah, well, Chinese medicine is based off of utilizing Chinese medicine uses the five elements. It's not like I think the more kind of pagan is
Yeah.
air, water, fire, earth.
Yeah. And then was it the other one, spirit? Is that the other one for Chinese medicine?
No, that's Ayurvedic, but
Okay.
Chinese has wood in there.
Okay. And wood's
And
not earth?
wood's not earth.
That's
Wood is
interesting.
wood, fire, earth, metal, water.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
metal can be like in the Ayurvedic kind of like spirit ethereal realm. Metal has that quality, and then wood also has a lot of qualities of air in Chinese medicine. It's
Okay.
really, but you can't overlap the systems. You got to just look
Pick
at it.
one. Yeah.
You got to just look at it completely different.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I look at everything from the five elements
Right.
perspective. Right now, we're coming up on the spring equinox, so we are moving from winter, which is water, into spring, which is wood. So now, like the idea of water in the winter is like water is the most dense, the most yin. Water represents fear, our subconscious, our inheritance from like our inherited traumas from our family, very and then spring and wood is like is anger, frustration, but also the catalyst for change. Like what's the beauty of anger is that something needs to shift, something needs to change. So this now we're moving into spring. This is the time to like take action. And the liver chi and the wood element loves action. It wants to grow up towards the sun and expand its branches while also maintaining a rooted groundedness. So yeah, so I kind of, like I look at now, like, all right, we're going into the wood season, very like liver time. So like yesterday, I just juiced some dandelion greens and like really kind of thinking about nourishing the like what's another big thing people do in spring is spring cleansing
Mm-hmm.
and spring cleaning. And that's naturally a big part around like clearing out the liver, especially if you had like a winter on the holidays and you drank a lot of alcohol or something. This is a really good time to kind of give the liver a reset, give the digestive system a reset to like clean everything and
Yeah.
to help you like really grow and expand with like a lot of just like clarity.
So what's summer?
Summer's fire.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
duh.
yeah. No, I mean it's but yeah, so once we hit the summer solstice, that'll be when we transition from spring, from wood to fire. And then of course with the summer fire, I mean we want cooling foods, we want to be by the water. It's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all sorts of like watermelon and cucumbers
Mm-hmm.
and
I
yeah,
remember learning about the elements, like the like in the Chinese medicine in massage school. They just touched on it real briefly, but I remember
yeah.
cracking up about like all of the characteristics per each one, because my mother-in-law is an angry person and her business is Greenwood, or was called Greenwood, and I
That's
thought it was so
funny.
funny. I was like, wow, that really matches her. So I do love it. So when you look at people, do you get like a sense, or like what if a client walks in with you to you, do you get a sense from them energetically where you're like, oh, their elements are off, or do you have a way to kind of test it like energetically, or do you just start like talking to them and you get a feel? Like, how does it go?
It can kind of go both ways. I'll
Mm.
I'll be able to see it from like I'll be able to see it, especially if it's really obvious, like, yeah, like someone that's really timid and like talks really like
Yeah.
scared and like
Yeah.
nervous, like that's a, like they're encumbered in fear, and that's like
Right.
very water and like there's like a dampness to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sometimes I've been like, oh, whoa, like their water element's way off. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it does take some like questions and some inquiry, like especially if the person's overall not like screaming out in pathology, but they're like coming in for, menstruation issues or and stuff. And it's like menstruation could be rooted in like, the spleen earth element. It could be rooted in the liver wood element. It could also be rooted in like the kidney water element. So then I would have to ask some questions to differentiate like what's the root of them having like painful periods and
Right.
figuring that out.
I
Yeah.
know that's always the thing when you go to acupuncture, like they ask you about your periods. I remember that.
Yeah, the
You're like,
consistency of the
"Oh,
blood, like
please."
what does it look like? Are
Yeah.
there clots? Is it purple? Is it pink? Or is it red? And then we ask
Yeah.
that questions about the stools and like, are your stools firm or are they soft? And people are like, I don't know. I'm like, is it like soft serve ice cream or is it like a log? And people are like, why are you asking me these questions? I'm like, you have no idea the amount of information this is giving me.
I know. I remember it really wigged me out when I first went to acupuncture. Like, why are they asking me all these things? But
Yeah.
it's cool because it's like that's what you would expect from medicine and from doctors to,
And they never ask those
they
questions. I
never
mean,
do.
they
No.
never ask those questions. Yeah, my friend that had a fungal infection. I mean, fungus in Chinese medicine is oftentimes very damp, and
Yeah.
sugar is what generates dampness. And so my friend had a chronic fungal infection, and I was just like, like kind of in the realm of candida, which most people now know with candida, you really got to get off dairy and sugar and all those things. But the doctor didn't ask her one thing about her diet, and it wasn't until she saw a naturopath and then and me to be like, just get off the sugar, like get off the yeast, and
Yeah.
like all her fungus stuff went away, with just that minor shift. Meanwhile, this doctor wanted to get her on all sorts of antibiotics,
I
thousands
know.
thousands of dollars of tests. And it's just like a simple question
I
around
know.
maybe stop eating like sugar and dairy and wheat for a little bit.
Let's see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it can be infuriating.
Yeah.
What like so who are your ideal clients? And like so you're mostly you mostly work by just doing in-person bodywork sessions, I'm assuming.
So I have clients that I see in the Los Angeles County. My ideal clients are honestly anyone that's ready to do the work and heal. And
Hmm.
I work anybody that has anything that they want to work on and they're willing to really step up because I don't just treat symptoms. I'm like, for
Yeah.
me, unless there was physical trauma to like they got felt, in a biking accident or something like that. But mostly anything else is going to be rooted in some sort of emotional piece.
Hmm.
And I'm always going to want to get into the psychosomatics of what's going on. And not everyone is willing to go there. So
Right.
at this point, I can tell in one session if someone's willing to go there or not. And if they're not, I mean, my practice is full. I'm not even taking new clients, and unless they come really highly recommended. And
Hmm.
I try to be like a family doctor, so I work with families.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to waste my time with anybody that's just like, well, help me. I don't want to do anything to change my life. I just want you to help me and alleviate symptoms. I'm
Like
like, you
you
know
have to
what?
be, yeah.
Yeah, then go to a spa. Like, I'm not.
You're supposed to be like a co-partner in your own freaking journey
Yeah,
and yeah, your
yeah,
experience. That's
totally.
awesome. I love it so much. Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about the herbalism mentorship. So that's something that like if people like you and like are appreciating what you having to say, like you do have a way to work with you remotely, which is through your course. Is it a live mentorship or is it like an
It
evergreen or what?
it's a live mentorship. We're in it right now, but I'm going to be launching another one in the fall.
Okay.
So you can definitely start to sign up for the fall, and then
What do people learn in that?
oh man, it's deep. We go deep. It's 3 months. We do a plant diet. We do 2 plant diets. So you get to go on a special diet with a plant to really tune into the spirit. And I do all sorts of prompts to really help you anchor in that communication and that connection.
Hmm.
But we go into like very Chinese medicine, like yin yang theory, the 5 element theory, and then sort of like what herbs from a Western and Chinese perspective are good for those pathologies that fall underneath those different imbalances.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And
Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, but I was gonna say the last thing I was gonna say is like, and I really encourage people to start their own little mini apothecary. So like I sent them some herbs and then I have them like kind of buy some herbs along the way and just start to build your at home, get your little shelf together and start to play and start to like find out what's going on.
Where are you filming your Instagrams from? Is that like you have your own office with all of your stuff like lined up?
That's
Looks like you have your own apothecary happening.
I do have my own apothecary happening. I built that in my house in Topanga.
Mhm.
It's all out of scrap wood. I built with my friend we call the pirate, who is a genius carpenter. And so we go on these woodworking missions together. And so we built that
That's so
together.
awesome. I know I've only just begun and I'm like, oh, I'm like, sorry guys, like my family. I'm like, this is like my green witch phase apparently. I'm like starting to like have little bottles of oils and tinctures and stuff. And it's like you
Yes.
have to start somewhere. Do you have like a garden on your land, on your property, or do you like get your plants from other people or what?
Right now I am just sourcing from like farmers or websites that are like as ethical as possible, as
Yeah,
local as possible. I have a friend that about 45 minutes from me is building a food forest and wants to plant a medicinal garden. So me and a couple other actually acupuncturists are combining forces to start getting some plants growing on that farm so we can source from
that's
local.
awesome. That's really
Yeah,
nice because it does make all the difference if you, especially if you could put your own energy into it and like
a
love.
hundred
Yeah.
percent. And then of course I do wild forage what I can.
Yeah. That's so cool. I know. I'm only just like I said, I'm just getting started. I'm starting an herbalism class this week with Robin Rose Bennett. Have you heard of her?
Oh yeah, totally
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she seems really cool. She was like one of my friend's teachers and I was like, she seems right up my alley. And I think I'm ready for this now to just delve
Yes.
in, there's like so
Yeah.
much to know.
There's so much to know. It's also a lifelong endeavor. And you don't, to anyone out there that wants to pursue herbalism, it can be really overwhelming when you're sort of outside looking in, but
Mhm.
just start with one plant at a time. Like even making your cup of chamomile at night to help you sleep, that makes like you're already like doing something productive with your connection to the plants. Like instead of maybe getting chamomile in a tea bag, now try bulk chamomile and like so you can actually like put your hands into it and like get
Mhm.
yourself a little strainer and like and I just encourage people like the best thing you could do is just go to an herb shop and buy some herbs and just like
Right.
and just see what happens. Um,
I think it's like a better experience when you're like breaking it up yourself and putting it, instead of having it be like already. I mean, I'm sure it's fine to just put it through a coffee grinder and get it finer, but I
yeah,
think it's nice. There's like something about that tangible experience,
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely.
So, and you
Yeah.
could taste the difference between the soils and everything, like you said, with it. That's how we started talking was like about the
Yeah.
soils with the, and what other differences were there that were so nuanced that you could identify, like where they were grown, how
Yeah.
they were grown.
Yeah, like for a tea, for something like Camilla sinensis, it's almost like wine. You know how wine is all grapes, right? But
Mhm.
based off of where the wine is going to dictate the name of it, the flavor profile of it, or
Right.
how the season and the climate was one year and the
Totally.
altitude. So tea is definitely one of those plants that's completely like malleable in terms of its like flavor profile based off of all of those environmental circumstances. And then of course, like with herbs, I'm sure there are levels of that too. I mean, I haven't like, it's kind of like mullein or yarrow that grows all over the world. Like mullein that's going to be like, I don't know, kind of like on a really moist area, um, like maybe the like the backside of a mountain so that when it gets more of the morning sun versus the later sun in the day
Mhm.
that tends to have much bigger leaves. And so like is that mullein more powerful than the like smaller leaf mullein? I don't really know all of
Right.
that for sure, but all of
Yeah.
those are things to kind of consider when you're out there foraging,
Yeah.
like oh I found this mullein with the leaf this big, but I also found a mullein with a leaf this big and trying both. And maybe the smaller one has a lot more like flavor and intensity and
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of those
They talk about that with the Amanita, like the smaller ones are more concentrated, so they're stronger, versus the
exactly,
bigger ones and stuff like that.
exactly. Yeah. All of those things can play a role and stuff. And I just like, I don't know. I kind of like, I feel like we are kind of remembering and
Hmm.
coming back to a lot of these traditions and art form um, and also like regenerating a whole new culture around herbalism and plant medicine to the point where like a lot of the stories have been wiped out and folklore
Hmm.
has been like forgotten. And so rather than you could kind of mourn the disconnection,
Yeah.
or you can try the plant
Celebrate the reconnection.
and celebrate the
Yeah.
reconnection. Yeah, which I
It's like
actually
Mother
also
Earth is happy that we're remembering and that we're taking part again.
exactly. And like a whole, I look at it too as like as we are evolving creatures and species, so are the plants. And
Hmm.
so, like I don't know, something like a more complex autoimmune disorder. Now, in Chinese medical herbalism from back in like, 10,000, 5,000 years ago, they weren't talking about autoimmune treatments. But but it doesn't mean that like certain plants haven't recognized that like, oh,
Really,
they're getting
yeah.
sicker. Like
Yeah.
we need to boost up these new phytonutrients to help with these more like serious diseases. And I think the plants through the mycelial network and through our consumption, through our just consciousness sort of integrating into the soil, is going to help with that connection, so that the more complex our diseases get, the more complex these plants get to treat those diseases.
It's amazing. And I've heard stories where people talk about like all of a sudden these, plants are growing on their property, like these herbs or these whatever.
Oh,
And
don't,
it's
yeah.
just like, it's not so random. It's like Earth is like in communion with us and they're like, yo, use this.
Yeah, totally, totally. One thing I do have, and I really want to share this because like one way you can, if the mentorship is too big of an investment, time wise, financially wise, is I do have a monthly plant club
All
where
right.
that every month we get to just like talk about one plant at a time. I send it to you in the mail. We have 2 meetings online about it. I send weekly emails about it. And it's just like a deep dive into a single plant. And a big part of like our conversation right now is sort of a big part of my intention is like, let's create a culture around these plants, because it doesn't exist,
Right. Yeah. You're like, I guess I'm going to be the one to do it.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
happens. You kind of look around like this should exist. Okay. I guess I'm the one who's leading it.
Exactly.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending some time. I really appreciate it. And to remind people, you're at DoctorBones _ right on Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then from there, and I'll put it in notes and all that good stuff. So
Amazing.
thank you so much for spending time.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much.